Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. Today I'm going to be talking about the controversial remake of the horror classic Halloween. Written and directed by Rob Zombie and starring a handful of big stars and upcoming ones, the Halloween remake divided fans and moviegoers alike when it was released and still shocks today 10 years later. I am a huge fan of the franchise. The original Halloween is my favourite horror movie of all time, and going into this movie I knew exactly what I was getting into. Rob Zombie's dark, depressing world where everyone is the Antichrist, hates life and bleeds like the elevators from The Shining. Before I even watched the Halloween remakes, I thought that Rob Zombie was an evil person, bent on destroying cinema. Seriously, every YouTuber I watched, every review I read, every time I heard this dude's name, it was to slate him. It felt as though everyone hated him, and so I began hating him too. He was a bad director to me, but I never watched any of his films or listened to any interviews, but because of what I'd heard, this guy was the devil. But then I watched his film. The remake that ruined the franchise, the grotesque film that is a stain on cinema. Seriously, critics have called this film appallingly in your face, grim, nasty, white trash adaptation, another bloody disappointment, a foul-mouthed, soulless, low-rent slasher flick. What did I think of it? I loved it. I loved every bit of it. After watching this film, I felt as though I needed to find something to hate, something I didn't like. I felt pressured to hate this movie. Then I realised that people are watching this video to see my review. My opinion. And my opinion is Halloween is the remake that we deserved, or it's at least the remake that I wanted. I've now seen all of the Holy Trinity's remakes, and it's pretty safe to say Halloween is by far the best of the three. I actually enjoyed parts of Friday the 13th remake, so it wasn't all trash, but that's a topic for another video. Nightmare on Elm Street's remake? Yeah, let's get back onto the topic. All three of these remakes are basically just darker, more brutal versions of the originals. As for Halloween, that worked. I've always wanted to see an uber gritty, dark version of Michael's story, and Rob Zombie was the perfect man to do this. It also made a lot of money. In fact, it made enough money to make a sequel. I know, right? A sequel to a remake? That doesn't happen a lot. But then Platinum Dunes, Michael Bay's production company, caught on board. They went on to produce the Friday and Nightmare remakes, really dark versions. Do you see the influence? Just because Halloween was dark and gritty doesn't mean the other two need to be dark and gritty too, just to be successful. Both originals have elements of comedy in them. Nightmare is especially known for its tongue-in-cheek sadistic humour. In the remakes, humour was completely gone, and we were left with two movies that felt completely different from its source material. But that isn't always necessarily a bad thing. Evil Dead was pretty cool, and they went from gory laughs to gore. Yeah, just gore. But still, both of the other remakes had the dark comedy removed, and we were left with boring, unoriginal B-Tech slasher movies. But that's where Rob Zombie's Halloween shines. He had his own image, his own idea of how the film should have been done. The franchise desperately needed something new, and I think that Rob Zombie was the man for the job. So the film starts off, or spends half the movie, showing us Michael's backstory. I thought showing us the villain's origin would ruin my personal favourite slasher icon, just as Texas Chainsaw the beginning did. Leatherface without the mask just wasn't scary for me. I hated the idea of unmasking a villain. I just thought I'd feel the same way about this movie, but I didn't. This backstory just made Michael scarier to me. His dark past and surroundings just added to the fear factor. He now had a reason for being evil rather than just being born with it. Zombie definitely went for nurture rather than nature when creating his monster, and I really liked it. I found his backstory interesting. His family was obnoxious, the characters were memorable, and the acting was pretty solid. A rare sight in modern horror, and the dialogue, although a little on the nose in parts, hooked me from the very beginning scene. Zombie said it himself in an article in which he stated his 10 commandments for filmmaking, which I'll be bringing up a lot in this video, that always have a really badass opening sequence. While some people may interpret from this, especially if you're a horror fan, is showing the killer doing some killing. They do it in pretty much every horror film ever. Rob Zombie himself said you'd need a pretty damn cool opening, but what he meant was different. The opening for the Halloween remake and the sequel are both awesome, but for two very different reasons. The sequel does the whole murderous rampage intro, which by the way is one of my favourite sequences in the entire franchise and will be talked about more in my part 2 review. But the remake began with a simple family breakfast from hell. It's such a simple scene. Mum makes breakfast, dad sits at the table, daughter comes down for food, son murders rat in the bathroom. But the horrible characters these actors portray have such interesting dialogue, and bounce off each other really easily. Think of Rob Zombie directing the Reservoir Dogs opening, but with less Madonna and more. Some of the dialogue is a tad on the nose, but other than that I really like the way that Rob Zombie wrote. The film then goes on to show how Michael is a bit of a loner in a nut job, and that he's trying to be mentally cured by none other than franchise hero Sam Loomis. Well, a really depressing, foul-mouthed Sam Loomis. So basically just Rob Zombie's Sam Loomis. The actor though did a really good job, and he's a good actor. His performance was very different to Donald Pleasance. Very different. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Rob Zombie's Halloween is a very different movie to John Carpenter's, and so obviously the actors will portray the characters differently. Although I will talk about it more in my review for part 2, Malcolm McDowell's portrayal takes a little getting used to. A final note on Malcolm McDowell is that he is hilarious. In both films' bloopers, I swear to God he was so funny in both of them. Check out the bloopers for both films, they're really some of the best. As for Dave Farch's portrayal of young Michael, I really liked it. He did a good job and he was pretty creepy at times too. Sometimes when a kid actor tries to be creepy, like in the Omen remake, it just sucks. It ends up looking stupid and pointless. But in this one the kid did really well. Plus I've watched the audition tapes for all the stars and he seemed like a nice kid too. There's also a scene where Michael and Loomis have a conversation and Loomis asks him if he remembers what happened on the night. Michael says he doesn't remember anything, but little movement indicates that he does. This was a great addition and adds to the mystery. Either Michael knows that he's killing and feels no remorse or sympathy, or that he can't remember and forgets the killings to ease his conscience, which also explains why he's so calm and relaxed after murdering his family. I really liked this addition to the story and think that it was executed excellently. So we're about 45 minutes into the film and Michael is now big and buff. His mum, played by Sherry Moon Zombie, another frequent collaborator with her husband, has blown her brains out and Michael's gone mute, except for the odd grunt. I do like Sherry Moon Zombie in this film too. She seems like a cool person from footage I've seen in interviews and bloopers too, which, once again, is always an awesome thing. The sister was kind of a hit and miss with me, to be honest. She didn't seem like a bad actress or anything, it's just that she didn't really have a big enough role, or left enough of an impact for me to become a memorable character. She was definitely the weakest link out of the family, with the father and Sherry Moon Zombie being the strongest. So after spending half the movie with Michael, he's now grown into a fearsome giant who murders Danny Trejo and escapes the mental hospital, leaving a trail of seriously bloodied bodies behind him. He goes back to Haddonfield and grabs the classic mask, which looks awesome in this movie by the way. I have a big issue with the masks in this franchise. More often than not, they look stupid. I loved the first 2 masks, hated the 4th, disliked all the rest, but kinda liked the 6th a little. But then the mask in this one was just all gritty and worn and damaged, and it suited the atmosphere of the film perfectly. And now that he's donning his mask, he continues his murder spree while searching for Laurie Strode, a character which we have not seen yet. This is probably the biggest change between the original and the remake. In the original 1978 film, Jamie Lee Curtis's character, Laurie Strode, is arguably the most iconic scream queen of all time and is definitely one of the factors that make the original a classic. We see her from pretty much the get-go, but in this film the lead is actually Michael. We get more screen time and get to know him more as a character, but less with what should be the hero. This was a bold and ballsy move from Zombie, one that should be considered the thing that divided fans the most. Although a lot of people will hate me for saying this, I'm going to say it anyway. Rob Zombie's Halloween isn't just a slasher, it's kind of a character study as well. Character study of cinema's greatest slasher villain. No film in the franchise has attempted to do this before, a new take on the slasher formula, which is great. Some people hate this movie for being too much like the original in the second half, but then go on to hate H2 for straight up straying from the source material. I think fans need to make up their minds and decide whether or not they want to see the same thing over and over again, or watch something new, which I would rather see personally. Then we get to Laurie Strode's character, who is actually pretty good. I like the character a lot more in this film than in the second one, where she's less whiny and was a character I could actually root for. Scout Taylor Compton wasn't really a standout performance until like the last 30 seconds where she completely blew me away. Like, seriously. This is a spoiler review, so I'm going to be ruining the ending soon. I'll talk more about the ending more in depth towards the end of the video, but for now I'll just say this. When Laurie shoots Michael in the face at point blank range with a revolver, and his brains spray onto her face, and the reaction she gives was just completely amazing. She just freaks out, and I wasn't expecting the gun to go off, and she didn't either. The way she acts in this scene was so chilling and memorable. Zombie said in his 10 commandments to have a really cool, unhappy ending, and he abided his rule. The result? Perfect. Now we're on to the killings, and my god, it was pretty damn brutal. I'm talking sickening brutal. The kind of violence that kills a movie for some and ramps it up for others. Me, it ramped it up from a 10 to an 11. He kills quite a few people in very gory ways, but I won't go into detail about all of them. The one I want to go into detail with is the ghost sheet kill, which happened in the original as well. The reason I loved this one so much is that it threw fans of the original for a loop, just as Tom Savini did in the Night of the Living Dead remake. In the original zombie classic, viewers back then would assume the man in the cemetery is being a drunk, only to find he is a zombie. In the remake, the man in the cemetery really is a drunk, and when we find out, we are given just enough time to breathe before a jump scare, real zombie attack. This is similar to what happens in the Halloween remake. We see the ghost, assume it is Michael, just as the original was, and then surprise, Michael pops out, shoves the ghost, boyfriend, against the wall, and commits the iconic wall pin kill. I appreciate this scene as being jumpy to both fans of the original and newcomers. This little nod to Carpenter's was pretty damn cool. There were quite a few nods to the original as well, such as Michael being referenced to the shape, the use of Don't Fear the Reaper, and the thing from another world being shown on the TV throughout. There are literally some shots where you don't even notice Michael is in the frame, which is awesome. I was watching this film and trying to see if he was in the background. Sometimes I found him, sometimes I didn't. Then I saw some video afterwards and it pointed out all the background appearances, and this just made Michael just a little more terrifying to me and reminded me why he's my favourite slasher villain. As to not make this video too long, I'll talk about the end. You think Michael is killed when Sam Loomis pops a few shots into him when he's approaching Laurie in the empty swimming pool. In the original, this is where the film probably would have ended, but Zombie wanted to take it a little bit further. Instead, once Sam and Laurie are sat in the car ready to drive off, Michael grabs Laurie through the window and pulls her out. He kills-ish Sam Loomis by squashing his head. Things go down with a broom or a rake or something, and it ends with Laurie kneeling over Michael with a revolver in the face, just like I talked about before. This is the ending for the unrated version, the one which I watched, but maybe different, in different versions playing. Laurie then blows Michael's brains everywhere as she's screaming. We see a Super 8 film with Michael spending time with his mother as a boy, and that's it. Cut to black. This ending was shocking, brutal, intense, left my mouth wide open. It was a perfect ending to in my opinion, a near perfect horror film, and I loved it. To me, this is where Halloween ends. Halloween 2 is still a really good movie, but it's a bit of an add-on if you want more. To me, the franchise goes Halloween 1978, Halloween 2, then the remake. Halloween 3 is a if you want a fun cult throw-in, the Thorn trilogy is definitely a throw-out, and Halloween H20 is if you want to see Jamie Lee Curtis again. It's an okay movie, but it isn't really necessary. Resurrection on the other hand, they can go and die. Halloween ended for me when Sam Loomis sacrifices himself to kill Michael and Laurie getting away in the end of Halloween 2. That was a perfect ending to the franchise, and that's how I saw it all wrap up. The remake is an excellent movie and has a nice ending for me, where a sequel wasn't really necessary, but it's still nice to have. In the end, Rob Zombie's Halloween was a great remake of the greatest horror film of all time, and in my opinion is definitely amazing. I'm definitely going to get a lot of hate for this. Thank you for watching everybody, hopefully you enjoyed. This is probably the most effort I've ever put into a video, as you can probably tell by the runtime. I had to write 6 pages of a script, so yeah, hopefully this one does really well, and if it does I'll make a part 2 for Halloween 2. This was more of an analysis as well as a review, so hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like down below and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in the next video.